Greetings and welcome to Edgy Ideas, the podcast that explores what it means to live a good life and to create the good society in our disruptive age. My name is Simon Western and I will be talking to invited guests about diverse topics, exploring social conscious and unconscious dynamics and desires. Welcome everybody to this episode of Edgy Ideas. Today I'm delighted to have Professor Tatiana Bachkirova with me. Tatiana is Professor of Coaching Psychology and Co-Director of the International Centre for Coaching and Mentoring Studies at Oxford Brookes University. She's a recognised author, international speaker and an active researcher. Her books include Developmental Coaching, Working with the Self, and the SAGE Handbook of Coaching 2017. Tatiana, really lovely to have you here. How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you, Simon. Lovely to be with you too.
Good. It's been a while since we met. I came to Oxford Brookes and did a talk there, but that was a few years ago, I think.
Yes, it was in a different life.
A different life, indeed. Today's topic we agreed we'd talk about is why coaching needs to change. Can you say something about why you think coaching needs to change to start us off?
Coaching sort of made huge progress, and it made progress on enthusiasm of coaches, I would say. Yeah. But there is always the other side of enthusiasm. And that's what I would say probably would be the good start for our conversation, because I would like to hear also what you think about it, Simon. What you see as another side of huge enthusiasm.
Yes, it surprised me coaching. When I was director of coaching at Lancaster University, I thought it might be a fad, to be honest. I thought it might grow very quickly and then be one of these management fads which came and passed. And I thought it would demise and still be with us, but smaller. Actually, it's grown bigger and bigger and bigger.
Absolutely. And I'm not surprised, actually. I think one of the biggest strengths of coaching, which nothing before could offer it to the same extent, is that it is individually tailored. So it's actually helps people, whoever it is, clients or in organization, outside organization, to work specifically on their unique situation or their unique challenges with kind of this understanding of the person, which doesn't come with any other organizational activities.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that is its real strength, and I also think that that's one of its problems. I think it's I think you're right. I think it's a strength, and I think it's needed for two reasons. One, because as you say, it's very much tailored to their personal needs, which is fairly unique. And two, because people are quite alienated at work. There's a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of people feeling uncomfortable and not sure of themselves. I talk about people being dislocated at work. And I think coaching really helps support them when they feel like that too.
Yes, agreed. And I think also probably why coaching developed so quickly, because those who were helped in a similar way came very enthusiastic in this field and tried to do so many things which actually paid off. So it's good. We have now a whole discipline of coaching. We've done so much research and know and understand more. We have done something about the quality of this practice with various sort of success, but I see particularly supervision as a useful thing that has happened. So yeah, we need to recognize something good that has been done so far.
That's right. Something good has been done. And I mean, both you and I are critical thinkers, and one of the critiques I have is, which I come back to later, is this focus on the individual is both powerful and very useful, as we said, but also problematic, as it doesn't address a lot of the systemic issues in the workplace. And I see this drive towards the individual, both helpful and problematic. What did you mean when you said that you thought that the coaching was needed to change regarding kind of this new energy? So tell me more about that.
And by the way, it's not maybe too many people would agree with that, but I think that there is another side of enthusiasm. And what is I observe through working with all different coaches in very different contexts, they do want to impress, they do want to improve things, they keep positive, overly positive in my view. And this is what is missing. It's what is missing is kind of mature criticality about what is going on. And I started writing about that and speaking. So, for example, coaches keep buying in uncritically all sorts of ideas, like I call them beautiful ideas that make us ill, like positive psychology, mindfulness, neuroscience, you just name it, whatever. And there is no serious critical approach of what is useful and what is not.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I mean, just for the audience, when you and I talk about being critical, we're not talking about being negative. We're talking about critiquing things and really asking difficult questions, asking about some of the assumptions and some of the practices, which, like you say, I think is really missing in the coaching world and in the wider management field generally.
Exactly. Yes, it's not negative. I actually see it's very important for development of the whole business of that. And it's just simply recognition, as you say, systemic issues, complex issues, complexity in principle. Our field is full of paradoxes.
It is. It is. I'm intrigued by coaching. There's been different ways of coaching. You could say the first phase was a lot of enthusiasm, and we had unregulated coaches. There was that famous paper called The Wild West of Coaching describing this. And then we got a power play by some of the institutions and a regulation bodies like the ICF, and they it's an interesting mix between them having a business model which is very successful, incredibly successful. They got a huge slice of the coaching market, and they regulate at the same time. And I think that's kind of problematic as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yes, I'm. As I said, sort of something needed to be done to regulate the quality of the offer that coaching provides. But one of that, what I name as problematic offer, it's the one that trying to create sort of one-dimensional approach of accrediting everyone, and this is what I feel like not meeting the different needs of clients as well. It's this very kind of basic competences based approach. I kind of think in some way something needs to be done in that regard, but not in that blanket way as particularly ICF provides.
Yeah, I agree, because I find it very difficult. I mean, my coach training, my analytic network coaching, we work in a way which is very different from kind of just an individualistic focus. Of course, we focus on depth analysis, on using psychodynamics of understanding the individual, understanding their relationships, understanding how they take up leadership and followership. And then we think about how they influence systems and how they are influenced by systems themselves. So we build in this critical kind of view. But it just doesn't fit with an ICF idea of you have to set a goal and a target, and it's very linear, it's very positivistic, linear approach, which really doesn't fit with my approach, your approach, and many others' approaches.
And I think it's probably one of the consequences of trying to explain what coaching is about. And that was, we did struggle with that, with the clientele, with the stakeholders, because not too many people have understood what is on offer. And that's where all these short models, abbreviations that people keep creating. And I would say that sort of desire to introduce it as a very simplistic thing sort of went too far.
Yeah, I think you're right. When I'm teaching coaching, one thing I talk about quite a lot, and I've written about, as you know, from my book, is the wounded self and the celebrated self, and how coaching is a bridge between these. And I think the other thing which happened with coaching was it tried to differentiate itself from therapy at the beginning. It tried to draw lines between itself and psychology and therapy. And in doing that, it turned towards positive psychology wholly, and it turned towards kind of solution focused, and it didn't want to look at the wounded self. And I understand very clearly, and I talk to my coaches about, you can't get lost in that place, but you have to be able to work with the celebrated self and the wounded self. You can't just kind of look at people as if they're only can be positive or only pathologized.
Yes, exactly. And this is another consequence of sort of trying to bring more rigor to the field and trying to create this sort of science-based approach, and positive psychology, and still is quite a dominant feature and considered also to be properly researched, although lots of questions need to be asked about that as well. And that's why some people, even good people, were trying to say that it's the coaching is more or less the main theory of coaching is positive psychology. And I was always very much against that, because that's, for me, exclude the different needs of our clients and creates one-dimensional approach to treating everyone like the same, that we all need to be cheer up and be happy.
Yeah, we need to be able to be sad as well. We need to be able to feel angry. We need human beings have a whole range of emotions, don't they? And to just try and limit us to kind of the happiness imperative and being happy and being positive is a very limited way of thinking about human beings, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And more than that, and what I was very much against that, it's really sort of feeds into this idea of self-exploitation that sometimes is what happens in organizations, because organizations have some specific agenda for people to be resilient, to deal with whatever mess is happening in them. And it's kind of putting the responsibility for dealing with the negative feelings just through positive psychology. You just develop resilience, you become positive and carry on.
Yeah, that's right. And coaching can really collude with that sort of mindset, which is, like, say, put people back together, make them resilient to whatever pressures they're under, throw them back into the workforce to be more productive, more growth.
Exactly.
And it can be a vicious circle, and coaching has to be very careful not to collude with that, and often it does, I think.
And that's what, for me, is one of the biggest topics right now, actually, what coaching is for. I don't think we really explore it properly, and we avoid thinking about that. Usually, if you want a job as a coach, you come and deal with what organization requires from you. Yeah. But there is a much bigger question, what we are doing in this field.
I totally agree. And what do you think, how would you frame it to say what coaches in an ideal world should be doing? How would you think about that, Tatiana?
Oh, that's a huge question. And I kind of don't have answers even to all of this, but I was thinking and trying to write about that. And, you know, my book is called Developmental Coaching. So in some respect, I keep saying that his development is sort of useful. And I think that coaching is the unique way of helping people develop. And in some way, I also would say development is useful for the world, because there are so much awful things are happening right now. And if we are not sufficiently developed, and what I mean by that, open to bigger issues, seeing what is happening outside of your immediate needs. If we need more people to be more like that in order to deal with the challenges that we face right now. So on the one side, I kind of keep saying that, but on another side, I do respect freedom of people to deal only with what is important to them. And I keep saying, nobody should be pushed to be developed. Do you see the problem?
Yeah, I do. But I think coach trainers, coach academics, coach theorists, coach researchers, I think they have a duty. I mean, I don't think it's about pushing any individual into answering these questions, but I do think as a coaching, our coaching bodies and professionals, that we have a responsibility to say, how does coaching fit into the wider workplace? What's really happening? You know, are we just conforming to precarious work? Are we just keeping workers resilient in intolerable conditions? You know, what are we doing, and what's happening in the world? What's happening with digital changes? These are the questions I'm asking my coaches to kind of bear in mind and think about. And I think we need to make alliances with managers, with workers, and help them think about this too, because coaching can be hugely influential at a leadership level. I mean, we have the ears of a lot of leaders, and unless we're thinking about these things, we can't expect them to. I think we have a responsibility.
Yes, but can you see there is also some issues in relation to that, because that's became quite popular right now in the coaching world, what I call the movement of activism. Okay, so you are you have climate coaches, you have coaches who actually sort of preaching a particular attitude to politics, to everything. Okay, and I say, okay, in some way, raising these issues, okay, or bringing it to the client awareness, it is part of our responsibility. But if it's not on the table for what they need to deal with, what right do you have to bring it? Because what I'm saying, it is another one of the paradox, okay? Because we keep saying of the sacrosanct of the agenda of the client. So you are there, and they are paying to you, and you are preaching of what is important to you.
Well, I take
Sorry.
Citizens of the world, that we can't negate our citizenship, that we're citizens of the world, and that I don't say that we should come in with a specific political view or a view, but we are citizens of the world, and there are issues to be discussed, and that coaches. I mean, it's interesting that when I trained to be a psychotherapist, and we trained with psychoanalysis, we used to talk about the psychoanalyst being purely neutral, as if, and we used to think about scientists as being purely neutral. But now we know that scientists are human beings, and they have agendas, and there's cultural views, and there's perspectives, and these have to be accounted for. And so with coaching, that there's no purity, there's no absolute neutrality, is there?
No, there isn't, because then you are not sort of your. I also keep saying that we work with ourselves as a main instrument. So if you are not yourself, so you are also not doing a good job. But okay, how I was trying before to sort this issue for myself, I don't know if it will help, and maybe it will be some deviation from the topic. But I was always saying in my book as well, okay, if you are actually working with what client needs to deal with, and that it comes down actually where the client is, what is worries them, okay? What I call it disequilibrium. If they have some sort of internal disequilibrium, and you are working with them to process it, to think it through, and that sort of, when you solve that one way or another, and the client more or less solve that with your help, then there is more opening in the consciousness of the client for something bigger, for more, okay? And that's what is development in some way. You are not kind of artificially bringing what they are not ready for. Otherwise, you are not working with the real energy.
Sure, and I think that's very helpful. I mean, in a sense that from a psychodynamic point of view, we could talk about creating a space for thinking, or a containment, and to create that space, you have to deal with what's emotionally in the room in front of you. You have to deal with that the immediacy of what the client brings, what you say. Otherwise, you're going to get lost anyway. So, I think that's a very important point, that you actually deal with what's being presented, and then you have a space where they can actually allay their anxieties a bit. They can become, you shift someone from being just reactionary to developmental, don't you, through that process?
Yes, exactly. Yes, but as I said, it's still kind of one of the solution. But part of me is not completely satisfied with that, because you do want, and that is, I would say, a moral issues right now, still for kind of everyone to contribute somehow to the development of the critical mass, I would call it, in the world, that actually make a shift. So, yes.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess the way I deal with it personally is to be very upfront about my position. And I think that's another thing in coach training, trying to make a coach awareness of how culture speaks through them, how the society speaks through them. We make assumptions that this is the way things are, but that can be a very American kind of individualistic way. If you're a coach using positive psychology, it's not that doesn't fit with all cultures, as you very well know yourself. And
you are right, okay? And I think one of the solution, even with this activism. So, by the way, I'm not against these people, coaches who call themselves climate coaches, but that's clear, because they, from the very beginning, they say, this is my agenda, and if you want to work with me, I will work with you on that agenda, okay? I have no problem with that. It's just simply manipulating the client to your agenda when they actually do have some serious concern of their own.
Sure. No, I mean, at the headline of my website and my marketing, I talk about our coaching is to coach leaders to act in good faith to create the good society. So there's a very generalistic kind of ethical stance there, saying, we're going to be looking at kind of what this means for you. So I don't impose kind of what that means for me upon the client. But I'm if I'm working with a leader, we're going to be asking that about them and their company, their purpose, how they work authentically, what it means to them in their particular culture and their particular space. But as you say, always after you've dealt with kind of what's in the room, what's the immediate kind of anxiety and preoccupation.
Yes, and this is why I started thinking about this difference between aspiration and ambition. And I don't know if it makes sort of relevant to this conversation, but I think it is. And that's why I'm advocating criticality as the quality that we need as coaches to develop, because you start not from some sort of ideal. For example, I'm very much skeptical about the Bayaz's theory of this ICT, that you develop your ideal self and you work towards your ideal self. I think it's actually much better if it's the other way around. If you not kind of working towards something that you already imagined would be wonderful from the state where you are in, but the other way around, what you actually start seeing that against your value or doesn't work at all or not helpful or even unpalatable, okay, that's when there is another energy. So that's what one of the authors colored, she called it aspiration, because with an ideal self, it's an ambition. And that's what we are full of ambitious people who actually wreck the world. But if it is seeing what's not right and what from that disequilibrium, then I said, from this one, it's a different energy. And that's what we probably need to bring more in coaching.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I've not heard it put that way before, but I think that's very interesting. I certainly feel that there's a very kind of utopian idea, like you say, this ideal self, or you peel off the onion and there's a perfect self within, and if only we can find it, it will lead us to the nirvana and to heaven. And we know that actually that always leads to disappointment, because there is no after the ideal self, and actually creates a huge amount of discontent. If we look at the USA and you look at the amount of psychology there, you balance that against the amount of depression and loneliness, and the stats on antidepressives and anti-anxiety medication are just vast. So it clearly isn't working somewhere.
Absolutely. And that's why one of my arguments was against positive psychology, because if people are already miserable and then you actually work with them, making them happy, and they cannot be happier, so they feel twice as failures. Something doesn't work even with me. Why can't I be happy?
That's right. And we imagine all the rest of the world is happy.
Yeah.
Putting on a happy face and trying to kind of put on a brave face because I think this is one of the problems in the wider workplace is that people are very worried about disclosing how they really feel because
Exactly.
they're afraid of losing their position. If they seem to be that they lack confidence or they lack that there's a weakness, they still feel that they might be kind of not promoted or they might not get forward. And I think, I don't know what your experience in coaching is, but I wrote a lot about the coaching confessional, that I would go in and start coaching with someone, and very often, because of the way I listen and the way I've been trained, people would just confess their anxieties and their preoccupations. I don't have to kind of push them there. They just find that one-to-one space, that safe, confidential space, a rare place where they can actually share their worries and their concerns, because there's not many other places for them to do so.
Oh, I'm not surprised, Simon, that you create such an effect, because I have to give a compliment, because this is what I see that you are doing in terms of your critical position to everything. And it's like openness to whatever is in the world. And when I read your first book, the one on critical text on coaching and mentoring, and the criticality is there in practically every word. And it's one of the coaching books that I read from kind of start to end. We have too much of literature right now, but it was a rare one, and I recommend it since then to everyone.
No, that's very kind, thank you. And I do. I think we're on the same page here, but we are marginal voices in the wider field, aren't we?
I'm afraid so. But interestingly enough, and this is what I kind of although I'm critiquing positive psychology, but there is an optimist somewhere in me to some extent. I notice that people are much more open now to this type of conversations. And I was recently given a keynote in Finland, and that's quite an interesting country, and also in Sydney in relation to these beautiful ideas. It was absolutely amazingly received. People were so happy to hear that and come and talk, that we really need to be open about these difficulties in the field, in the same way as we should be open about difficulties in anywhere.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm seeing a space opening as well. I mean, sometimes I talk about a third wave of coaching, and I see the first wave as being this enthusiasm. There's life coaches, executive coaches, and coaching come from all different places and ideas, and it was very disorganized. And then there's a second wave where it became kind of regulated and started to identify itself around positive psychology and goal focused, solution focused, and there's some regulation. And I see a third phase now where there's quite a lot of coaches, and they've been through that second phase. They love coaching. They know it's important, and they're looking for something else. So they know that the limitations of the positive psychology approach, of the sort of solution-focused approach, of the NLP approach. They see the limitations, and they're looking for more thoughtful ways of coaching, and they know there's something more. And I think that's what you've just described, really. And I see that in my practice. People are saying, like, yeah, I've been through that phase, and now I can see there's an opportunity to do something even deeper and richer.
Yes, I would probably even call it some sort of healthy skepticism is developing.
Yeah, and it's really important. And I think in society around us at the moment, where we face pandemics and populists and all the different challenges facing us, I think this critical thinking and this healthy skepticism is going to be very important, because people know that there's not simple answers anymore. There's not kind of a simple answer of jumping to a solution or finding a happy way out of this. We have to kind of confront the whole of humanity and everything it throws at us.
Absolutely. Yes, and that's what kind of I feel myself somewhat on a mission against what I call popularism, and in order to bring a little bit more of this side of the conversations on coaching.
Do you see you work with different cultures in different countries? Do you see major differences in different places you work, Tatiana?
I would say yes. In America, it is slightly different, but I was lucky because what I mean different, because there is some different culture there in terms of the more kind of attuned to positive psychology. But I was lucky in the sense that I was teaching supervision programs there. And so the people who come for that type of program, they already are quite experienced and really feel sort of some issues that existed in the field. So I still see there is the good, appropriate level of thinking is everywhere right now. And I do like, of course, the European approaches, and in Australia there are lots of good thinking is developing in this regard. I have to say I was very impressed actually with the way how it's also developed in Europe, and Northern Europe in particular.
Yes, yeah. I think your focus on supervision is very important. I think coaches can really learn from that more. I mean, one thing I'm setting up this year is communities of practice for the coaches I train and for wider coaches to make sure that we do this continuing professional development, that we build this criticality into our thinking. So I think creating communities of practice where, for me, that's where you get quality control and that's where you get development, much more so than trying to regulate it through sort of tick boxes, how many hours you've coached or how many sessions you've had. For me, it's really about the quality of supervision, the quality of training, and the quality of continuing professional development, which will kind of help coaching move forward. I wonder what your thoughts are.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, and this is what is the big difference between the accreditation systems, because it's a snapshot, even if, okay, some competencies are needed on the basic level, but it's only a snapshot. It's never enough. Okay? For me, I would just call it, okay, you got it. Now you can start developing yourself properly from that level. And this is, I would say, obligations on the part of the coaches. If you are hoping to contribute to the development of others, how can you stop? And it's just quality control, because it's a very developmental conversations that are happening in the community like yours, or in particular in supervision. It's not for the kind of checking and monitoring or kind of supervising in the managerial sense. It's exposing your practice to think about that together with someone who is kind of interested and capable to give you good feedback and interesting input in the conversation.
That's right. And it's absolutely vital. I mean, I find that the people, I mean, for me, it's just a real pleasure. I mean, to meet you is a real pleasure and talk with you and bounce ideas off. It makes me think, and to go to these communities of practice, and sometimes we have a keynote speaker who brings a new idea or a different way of looking at something, or we bring a coach in and they talk about a case or a theme. Mm-hmm. And it really sparks, it's a very enjoyable community to work in when you can create generous communities which share best practice, share thoughts, become reflective practitioners. It's one of the real pleasures of our work, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes.
Tatiana, we're coming towards the end of this podcast. It's been lovely talking to you. I ask guests at the end of a podcast to think about what they think can help us to live a good life and to create a good society. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on how coaching can help us to live a good life and to create the good society. What your thoughts are on that?
I forgot about this question. All right, but actually, just following our conversation, I think what we need is probably, I don't want to call it moral imperative, but something like that. It's an ability to develop an ability to think about serious issues, not only on a small scale, but for the whole world, and the ability to be critical of what is happening around us. So I just think that is so important right now.
Yeah, and I think you've made that very clear throughout this whole podcast, and I think that's really, really important. So that's very good for our listeners to go away and think about how they can develop their critical thinking and become reflective practitioners and think about how they impact on the world. So thank you very, very much. It's been really lovely talking to you. Take care, and I look forward to working with you or speaking with you in the near future.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you for listening to Edgy Ideas. If you enjoyed our podcast and would like more information about our coaching, training, and events, please contact simon@analyticnetwork.com or go to www.analyticnetwork.com. Thank you for listening.